Two. Okay, guys, welcome then to tonight's session. I'm Steve Miller, and I'm going to be talking quite a bit in and around sort of some of the things that I thought about before I started to embark on my career within physio, moving into a sporting role, and then obviously kind of on the back of that, the commonest questions that I tend to get are generally the ones in and around how can I follow suit and end up kind of doing something similar. So I'm going to give a bit of an intro to start with, just so you guys can kind of make your way in from whether you're at university or you're coming back from work or whatever. But in essence, yeah, even this week I got a nice little message from one of my friends, Ange Jackson. You guys.
Would customers please note that you can only alight from the front 7 coaches, as this station has a short platform. Please.
There we go. Sorry about that, folks. Right, shouldn't get any more interference here. If you can try and keep your microphones off, that would be amazing. Yeah, so this week I got a message through just saying, how can I get some experience? How can I move into a role within sort of working in professional sport? And I think the big questions are sometimes it seems all glamorous and glitzy on the outside, but what does it actually look like behind the scenes? And is it actually what you want? And sometimes you have to walk that line, don't you, to kind of work out whether or not that's what you want to do. And hopefully by the end of this, you'll have quite a true insight into what it actually entails. So this is what you're here for. Do you actually want to work in elite sport? It is demanding. It does have amazing perks. It does have real challenges to it. It's very consuming. Am I glad that I've done it? I'm delighted I've had the opportunity. Feel really honoured to do it, but it does come at a bit of a sacrifice in other areas. So over the course of the next hour, hopefully there's lots of things you can kind of pick up that help you to look after yourself if this is the world that you're in. Now, this is my journey. Again, if you can, please do drop your who you are, where you work, what you wanted to get out of the session really into the chat group. It would be lovely to see sort of who's amongst the crowd during this. As I say, this is my journey. I've spent a lot of time working within different sports. That's given me great opportunities to go to Commonwealth Games, Olympic Games. Recently, sort of currently working with the Olympic and Paralympic athletes over at British Judo for the UK Sports Institute. I work doing little bits with the FA up at St George's Park. And I do some cover with British Gymnastics and some consultancy work as well. So it's quite a nice mix. I really love teaching. So I spend my days off, if you like, putting together material. Today, for example, I put together sort of a guide and a plan in terms of optimizing recovery with an athlete. So we all train really hard and train like pros, but do we actually recover in the same sort of caliber? I find that it's generally not as good. And then I also put together some of the testing material if you have a screening or a profiling day. So that's nearly finished, and that was all on the trunk. So lots of things in and around how to test the cervical spine, the thoracic spine, the lower back, and in and around the hip as well, and some of the contributing factors. So that's how I spend my days off, in theory, putting together material that goes on to the Grow Physio Academy. There's a whole host of different things that are on there. I'm just showing people are tuning in remotely or listening in. Basically, it's just a little bit of an image of the Grow Physio Academy website. So that's where I put all of my material so people can access and hopefully upskill themselves, feel a bit more confident before moving into sort of a sporting or within a team role, really. It's something I found really tough initially, even though I'd sort of worked in part-time sport for quite a few years. I'd done my master's. I'd worked in the NHS for 6 or 7 years, but this world of sport is completely different once you go full-time. The expectations from athletes, coaches, managers are ridiculously high. They always want everything done yesterday. So hopefully this will give you a lot of the tools and the skills that you need to help prepare you for that world or even kick you on. Hopefully it stops and means that you don't need to spend hours and hours of voluntary time doing stuff in the back end of nowhere with no help or support. It's a very structured, guided approach in terms of sort of helping you develop the skills you need. And we've got an amazing group of people who are moving on into some really exciting roles in professional football, professional rugby, a whole host of different things, both domestically and abroad. So it's a really nice community that we've created. Now, the material that I'm going to share tonight is from this Building Your Career backstage course. So there's things on sort of what a typical day might look like if you want to learn a little bit more, maybe how you want to set up your own business, how you prepare for interviews, things like that. So you can go on the site and have a little look at the Grow Physio Academy and check out that if you want to. And this is where this material tonight's going to come from. It's not all career driven, so we have quite a lot of step-by-step guides in terms of things to, again, help you understand how to manage injuries. If you have made mistakes, then you will, if you're anything like me, you will have learned quite a lot more from those than you will have done from potentially some of the ones that go amazingly well, or the ones that just plod on and go okay. So I've been in this world quite a long time. I've lost all my hair on the journey, but I'm trying to kind of help you guys avoid some of the mistakes and some of the errors and things that people typically make. And that might be my own, might be other people's. And that's absolutely fine. We're all humans, but there's a lot of learning that can be shared. And I'm a big advocate of kind of sharing that, really. So this is what the evening will look like. I'm going to play you the acute injury assessment and decision making. Oh no, that's not the one. I'm going to play you the first part of the session, which is basically the insight into how I moved into a sporting role, and then some of the other avenues and directions that you can take. And then at the end of it all, if you guys want to ask any questions, then by all means do. It's probably around 55 minutes, this talk, and then we'll have a chance to chat. It is all recorded, so I'm going to add that onto my YouTube channel. Please do go on there, subscribe to it. It's absolutely free. It's got lots of little tips and tricks in terms of sort of little assessments, rehab techniques, etc., etc. But you'll be able to rewatch things if you can't make the whole thing. So, yeah, there is a presentation going on again on a sort of a weekly basis, really, in this year, where we're trying to up the amount of contact that I can have with members. So if you do become a member and you want to be part of this, or you just want to jump on and do another webinar, the one next Wednesday is all around how to manage things on the field of play. So that classic scenario where you go running on, someone's gone down, and all the different sort of decision-making processes you make depending on what's in front of you, how you communicate that with the athlete, how you make a decision, how to kind of relay that on to the coaches to make decisions. We can't bring everyone off because otherwise we'll have no players left. So we do have to kind of have a structured, nice, supported structure. And that's part of the Be Ready for Match Day course. So it's very much based on a lot of the work that I've done in rugby and judo over about the last 15 years, really. So lots of things from the FISIS course, level 3s that you'll see in there. Lots of things from the British World Gymnastics Championships and things where we did a lot of the recording. So if you have this upcoming, if you want to move into pitchside work, I would say as a bare minimum, do this. Ideally get an official qualification. Boom. And this is just me. This is where I kind of am on social. So I would say Instagram is probably where I'm, and LinkedIn are probably the most active in terms of me putting material out there. So if you do want to have a follow, it's grow.physio on Instagram. And do check out the academy itself, which you can have a little look inside for free as well. So it's growphysioacademy.com. Fab. Right, enough waffle from me. What I'll do is I will play the first part of this. And then we'll go from there. So I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you in about 50 minutes. Okay, hi everyone, and welcome back to Grow Physio. So this session's a little bit unique in the fact that what we're doing is trying to give you a little bit of a flavour, really, of sort of my backstory in terms of how I got to move into professional sport. So hopefully some of the things that I've learned along the way can give you a little bit of a clue in terms of how you can also sort of benefit from that and fast track your way in if that's what you want. So again, we'll go through the different various routes that you can apply and go down in terms of getting into sport, a little bit about me, my background, how that transition can occur, the highlights, the challenges, and then we'll almost sort of summarize everything together. Now, when I qualified back in 2006, what I had was a rare landscape to step into, really. So there was various options after I'd qualified. Physiotherapy generally sort of angles you in the UK down a route towards the NHS. So you learn your different specialities, and it's almost geared towards that. And they miss the whole side of sort of returning to sport. There is clearly a musculoskeletal component. You will have musculoskeletal and orthopedic placements, but they definitely don't prepare you for sport. So when you come out, again, you've got various different options: NHS, private practice. You can move into OC health worlds. You could go into research. You could even travel abroad. But for me, sort of thinking about how do I then transition in the long term into a sporting role was where I was. So I had this little scenario here, really. Where was I going to go? There was either the option to potentially sort of go down an intern or an academy style route. Again, learning a little bit more about that now. The hours very unsociable, they're pretty long. If you want to learn significant amounts, what you're going to likely do is go and join the first team or observe or shadow some of that world, and then at the end of the day is then add on your academy, because most of the youth and the juniors generally go to school or in education in some form. So therefore what you need to do is almost add that on to the end of already a potentially long day. You're still going to have weekends. The pay is generally incredibly low. But what it does give you, which I think is quite nice, is exposure to a sporting world on a regular sort of full-time basis. You can trial things. There's probably not as much pressure as there would be with a senior squad. So therefore you can extract and try things without maybe sort of being slipped up as much. Your alternative is potentially, again, very rare that anyone's going to step directly into a senior squad role. So if you are part of a medical team, it's pretty likely that you're going to have to work your way up, or you're going to have to get a skill set that is desirable enough to then step into a senior squad role. I've known a lot of people who've kind of gone into that role as a sole practitioner. So sometimes when a job is advertised, it's really worth knowing who is around you. What is the support network? Have you got any additional help from a medical or an S&C perspective? Because what sometimes happens is when these lower level clubs advertise for roles, you end up becoming a bit of a jack of all trades and you end up doing everything as part of it. So do ask a little bit about what's involved, because otherwise you can get absolutely drowned in the amount of workload. The advantage of being in a more established, bigger club potentially is the guidance, the support, maybe having a head physio, a head of performance, or a head of medicine who you can turn to. If you've got medics that are in there, obviously that covers your back. They can organise investigations a little bit quicker. And ideally, your development is the absolute key here. So make sure you've got some specific CPD requirements, some mentoring that's factored into your role. You might decide that you're going down a private practice route. Again, you might get some weekend warriors, some sports clubs that sort of drip into you that way. It might not be full immersion. You might have to pick up some insurance stuff around it. Maybe people who are just sort of office workers who are sort of getting occupational related necks and backs and shoulder stiffnesses and things like that. But I think it's challenging going straight into a private practice world. As physios, I don't think we get a great deal, certainly not enough business mindset associated compared to something like a chiropractor who has an entire module on business related things. Again, it'll give you a bit of a varied caseload and has its positives as well. You might want to be involved with some sort of university sports contract. So again, these are really nice things to get involved in. It might be that once you attach yourself onto a team, you're there for trainings, you're there for match days. Quite often what I find in this world is you end up doing a lot of triage of various different sporting roles. So you might be immersed in a university, but actually get people from hockey, from netball, from football, from rugby, whatever sports that may well drip in. The facilities are usually pretty good in universities. So you've got nice gym facilities, you've got testing facilities if you have access to them. So clarify those things. And again, you'll have that match day cover. So again, the downside is you're likely to have that potentially on weekends. It might be on a Wednesday, which might fit much, much better. But again, it gives you that exposure to acute management and injuries. Other routes that you can go down: English Institute of Sport across here. Again, you can have development programs coming at different levels. There's a very significant performance drive related to that, because a lot of the funding that comes at this elite level will be based on the performance of athletes. So just to sort of show you, on the left hand side really is more like the route that I took. So what I didn't immerse myself straight away into sport. What I did was did my undergraduate, got some patient mileage, some exposure, saw a wide range of different things, was immersed in sort of semi-professional sport around it. And then what I started to do was add courses and CPD and specialize and get a good sort of desirable skill set, so then I could drip in at a higher level. Your alternative on the right hand side is that you go in almost with less of a skill set, and then start to build that up inside the environment that you're there in a sporting world. So it might be you do an internship or a voluntary role, you then picked up into an academy part-time or full-time position, and then slowly what happens quite often is if you impress and you instill some of the values that the club believe in, then you start to look at getting involved with the first team a little bit, and then eventually if a role comes up, someone leaves or they expand, you may well be first in line for that. You can then obviously specialize, you can become head physio, head of performance, etc. from there. Once you have that sort of managerial side and that expertise, again, depending on the sport that that's in, that might be incredibly niche, or it might be something that you can extrapolate and use across the board. There are some structured, sort of recognized qualifications, if you like. ACPSM is one of them. So you can do something like this, which is the bronze award, really. So again, it sort of almost breaks down the skill set that you may require in order to achieve the bronze level, obviously a little bit more for silver. And again, sort of the more hours, the more experience, the more CPD that you can demonstrate, the more likely you are to progress to the silver or gold level. Now, I would say that 100 hours of shadowing, when we think about shadowing, what we have to do is make sure that it is very valuable. So when you are potentially applying to help out at a club, or you're applying to start at a club, if you are the sole practitioner or you're working on your own, or actually if the main physio or the sports rehab therapist, whoever it may be that you're working with, is not available, they're not in sight, they're not helping nurture you, not helping develop you, again, you're not going to develop, and you might well actually de-skill quite significantly. You will get exposure to athletes, but again, what you want to try and do, particularly if you're doing a low paid or a voluntary role or whatever it may be, even in a paid role, you want to have someone around you who is going to build you up and help you grow. So again, things that are quite useful like that, you can sort of see on the right hand side, we worked in a really open plan clinic environment. So we had 4 or 5 beds in that with the doctor next door. And again, we could sort of observe, we could bounce ideas off each other, do cross referrals, assess things, and really sort of take anyone who was in with us under our wing and sort of talk them through that process. So let's just go through sort of my journey, really. Again, it's a little bit of a walk down memory lane, this really for me. So if you are already immersed in this, you might want to fast forward this on to the next stage. But for me, my journey began in about 2002, really, in terms of when I went across to Toronto in Canada. I did a pre-season with this chap at the top, a guy called Ben Smith. Great bloke. He was a goalkeeper for Newcastle United at the time. His old man was the goalkeeping coach until very recently. An amazing stint from him. But he arranged for us to go across and do a training camp across in Toronto in this high level facility, really. And this guy, Steve Hill, on the left-hand side at King's Cross Physiotherapy Clinic in Toronto, blew my mind. He was dealing with a lot of the triathletes. That is Lisa Bentley, one of the Ironmen, high-performing ones after her Hawaii win when we were there. He was working with some of the Toronto Maple Leaf ice hockey players. A lot of the girls and football teams were up and coming. The standard, miles better than what it was in the UK. Had some amazing bits of kit like a SwimX, so you could analyze people's running, swimming techniques, all that kind of stuff, really. Absolutely fell in love with it. All the movement analysis side of things. His eyes were unbelievable at sort of picking out little asymmetries, the way people moved and why that was happening, and then almost piecing them back together. So I absolutely fell in love with physiotherapy thanks to that man there. And I had initially applied to do medicine and was all set to start that down at Manchester, which actually ironically is where I am now. But actually what happened was I was always going to defer my entry anyway, but I decided at that point what I actually want to do is to do physiotherapy instead of medicine. Now, that is definitely the right move for me. Thinking about this now, Adam Kay, this guy on the right-hand side, if you haven't watched this, this is an amazing insight into the world of medicine. I'm married to a medic as well, an amazing hand surgeon for kids. And again, I've sort of seen the other side of this. For me, physio is definitely the way that I am aligned. But I think for me, there was limited sort of career advice. I knew that I loved health. I knew that I loved the human body. So I was naturally pushed towards medicine. But actually, it's definitely worth exploring all the different other avenues that you can do. This is some of them. I didn't have this many options when I qualified, but there is sports therapy that's starting to get additional recognition. It is certainly not getting the recognition that it probably deserves, to be fair. You can't necessarily at this stage step into the NHS as a sports therapist and have that rotational experience. There's sports rehabilitation, there's masters, variations, exercise sciences. So which direction do you go in? Physiotherapy is excellent. It's an established course. It is something that is recognized throughout the world. And therefore, for me, it was the perfect option. But I knew that I was going to take a gap year, really. And in that gap year, what I decided was, what am I going to do to make myself available and try and get into this world of physiotherapy? Because at this stage, I didn't have an offer. So what I decided to do was various things. So I worked for Médecins Sans Frontières, which is Doctors Without Borders, helping out, volunteering for them. And then sort of did a bit of traveling and put a lot of things together to try and make myself a bit more sellable when it came to interview. Some of those things were voluntary. So I had a couple of roles. One was at the Marie Curie, which is a sort of terminal palliative care ward with a big focus on sort of cancer support, really. So again, we were going in and supporting a lot of the individuals in that world. And also another local sort of special school, Woodlawn, was round the corner. This was an amazing facility for children with special needs. They were a mixture really of cerebral palsy, motor neuron disease, muscular dystrophy. And basically what we did was we went in and we supported the physiotherapists, the occupational therapists, the speech and language therapists with anything that they wanted. And for me, that really opened my eyes in terms of how important it was, although the patient is, or the child in that scenario was central to it, the amount of input that they had and the way that we linked together all the different health professions, as well as probably the most important support network for that individual was the family, and trying to tie all that together to deliver a package of care that was really important, really opened my eyes. Other things role-wise, where I developed a role within David Lloyd, which is a sort of sport and health club, quite a high level one in England. And some of those roles included lifeguarding, gym instructing, running classes such as these sort of speed and agility camps that they put me through, circuit classes, and basically sort of built me up from an S&C side of things, really. Then again, for me, just extra strings to my bow that I wanted to add were my coaching licenses. So I did my FA level 1 and 2 coaching badges that year. And also did my developmental coach award, which is the sort of tennis side of things. So I started to develop a tennis coaching side of that. Again, my background, very much football, very much tennis. So it fed into the things that I love. And if that is your passion, great. Whatever your passions are, you'll be much more motivated to do that. And I absolutely love teaching the kids on these camps and developing them that way. I also felt like I needed some really physio-specific skills, really. So I did a level 3 diploma in sports massage therapy, as well as the basic full body massage certificate that was there. I got involved with the Great North Run, just again at the finish line, doing some rubs, some treatments, some little assessment bits and pieces that were involved with that. And then also did my gym instructor award, which again, if you are not familiar with sort of S&C principles, it's a really nice way to familiarize yourself with all the kit, the approaches, the techniques that you do. And again, you could run various different things, circuit classes on the back of that. And again, it sort of got me really into training as well. On a slight little side note, the other sort of roles that I had, again, I did my lifeguard badge. And also that enabled me to sort of get involved with the RNLI, which living on the coast, again, it's a great rare opportunity, but you have a amazing bunch of individuals really who all volunteer to be part of this RNLI. They get a call at any time during the day, and potentially the first sort of 6 people who are the quickest to respond will go out to try and rescue whoever it is out at sea. Clearly, these guys need to be amazing in terms of their rescue skills, their first aid, basic life support skills. And actually, it was an amazing insight into sort of how they manage some of these scenarios and problem solving, because these are not straightforward. I managed to last about 4.5 weeks, I think, at Wet and Wild, which was this little facility here. It's basically an adventure-y water park, to be fair, is the best thing it was. But yeah, we had little moments where I just knew this wasn't necessarily the future for me, really. You can see the slide at the bottom there. That is one. The more vertical one is called the kamikaze. We'd come down there every single morning before the place opened in a harness, making sure that people hadn't fired nails into that. This is in a pretty rough part of Newcastle, and yeah, there were scenarios where people had climbed up and actually banged nails in. So that was random, and some things that I can't repeat, never want to see again happening in jacuzzis or lazy rivers in that world. Other things that I did, though, again, that are really worth having reach out to are the local universities, maybe sort of local clubs. Do they need any extra sets of hands? And really, it was, again, just a way to sort of see what happens behind the scenes in terms of testing. So, again, it might be that you're just doing data collection, but again, you can sort of see into the worlds that are there. No one wants to analyze this data. It takes ages. But if you put yourself forward, again, it can create connections and give you an insight into that performance side of the world. We also were quite lucky where we were. Gateshead Stadium was on our doorstep. That was an international facility, which, again, you can see there, amazing facilities, indoor and outdoor, that are there. That's where the English Institute of Sport was based as well. So a lot of the athletics programs went on there. And I had some great opportunities just by reaching out to go and shadow and see what happens in that world. So really recommend sort of reaching out to any clubs that are there. Same sort of thing, really. When I went on this journey, again, I wanted to make sure that I was going down the exact path that I wanted to go down. So again, these open days that you have at universities are a great chance to look around the facilities, get a bit of a feel for the campus. But also I would just recommend is just ask about lots of the different professions and the different courses and the differences that occur with them. And actually then you can start to bespoke yourself and align yourself with the exact course that you want to do. Physiotherapy might be very different in one institution compared to another, similar with sports therapy or sort of sports rehab. It might be very different. There might be different focuses on placement hours, the practicality of it, how much time you spend doing data, all those sorts of things. But pick up the phone if you don't have access to them, have a wider reach, email people. These guys want you to attend their courses, so they're usually pretty good at getting back in touch. But yeah, so I embarked. I actually ended up at Sheffield Hallam. I did my physiotherapy degree. That's me leaping off the fountain outside of the City Hall there on graduation day after my master's and getting my MACP. That is the same fountain that when my mum on that day was taking photographs of us, was stepping back to fit us all in and fell in the fountain. So yeah, that fountain has a little special moment for me. But once I'd qualified, I knew that eventually what I wanted to do was maybe work in a sort of a sporting world. How I was going to get there was a bit unknown, but my background, again, very sort of sport bias. Football was pretty key. I played for the university right the way through that process. I'd won the FA Vars before going to university with Whitley Bay. And actually I knew that that would then sort of lead into this, which was another role I had straight after university. Had a random visitor from a guy who I now know and I'm good friends with, to be honest. But this was something that I did after university. So I went across to the States and I did some coaching. And again, this is a really nice opportunity. There's Camp Americas, football coaching, tennis coaching camps, whatever it is that you're interested in. These are amazing things to be part of. And it really sort of helps expose you, apply some of your skills that you've developed along your journey. I started to do alongside the sort of soccer coaching side of things, the sports injury assessment advice stuff. And actually you do have a great deal of fun on the way through that journey as well. But yeah, this was where I eventually wanted to end up, really. And thankfully for me, again, it is a privilege and I feel very honoured that I've had that chance, and very blessed to be given the opportunities that I have been given. But again, this was the world that I really wanted to move into. So how was I going to get there? I knew there was going to be a lot of hard work to make that happen. But this was the sort of the end goal. This was almost the dream from when I was across in Canada to then sort of stepping foot into that world at that particular time. So this is how we got there. So when I was at university, on the left-hand side there is a little bit of a timeline. You can see it took me about 12 years to actually step into that world. So although I had the initial dream of doing it, I didn't want to go down an academy route. I wanted to get enough skills in order to make that happen. So when I was at university, I did a lot of help with Sheffield United, shadowing wise, helping with some of their experiments and some of their investigations and setting up links with the football team and them in terms of assessing. And I also did my elective placement at Leeds United Football Club. So I had someone called Dave Hancock, who is one of the leading pioneers, really, in terms of sort of, he's done some amazing things in sports worlds. And then obviously when that finished and I got my degree, I then went across to the States, worked for MLS camps, which were affiliated with LA Galaxy and Deportivo Chivas. And then really a little bit when I came back from that world, started immersing myself into the world of work, really. And I had a little bit of a mixed bag of things that I was doing. Connect Health is where I spent most of my time, which I'll talk about in a second. And around that, I worked at Tyndale. I worked at Team Northumbria, which was a local university with the sports clubs there. Worked at Nike, did my MACP. And that gave me a little bit of a nice background, really. So the main reason why I went into Connect, I never ever sort of have been as nervous for an interview in all my life doing this, because I knew that this was a big step for me in terms of developing. They have something called the Advanced Development Program, which at the time was a full day of training that was incorporated over 9 months. One full day would be allocated to just your development. So you'd be alongside some of the other staff that were there. And then on top of that, every other week you'd have another half day of training. So really, the value that they were going to bring to me was going to be huge with all of these areas. They were an organisation who had, at the time, they were smaller. They had a focus on primary care. They had a focus on occupational health contracts, and they also had some high street private clinics as well. So again, working across a lot of those gave me a nice variety and flavour of things that could develop me. This is where I spent some of my time dealing with some of the individuals down at sort of Horton in Sunderland, crossed the border against everything that I believe in as a Newcastle man, but went south across the river, a bit of rivalry between the two, but I ended up sort of managing all of Sunderland eventually. But the major positives of working for Connect for me were that sort of patient mileage. You could see a lot of individuals with a lot of different things. You'd start to pick up little trends and patterns that were occurring. But the training and the supervision that was delivered was amazing. They pushed me down a master's route doing my MACP so I could then teach on that ADP program. I then started to do a lot of team leader work and actually develop and help sort of promote the development of others in that world. The drawbacks for me, which ended up sort of becoming a little bit too much, and why one of the things that pushed me was actually the appointment times and the review times. The time between reviewing individuals was getting longer, and that didn't suit the way that I was working. I didn't feel like I was giving or able to give them what they required, and that for me just had a little bit of a knockback in terms of the quality. But while I was there, because I wasn't seeing a great deal of sporty individuals, what I again did was I was involved with Team Northumbria. I got involved a little bit with Newcastle Academy, and then got some shadowing advice and guidance from Newcastle Falcons Academy. But I also, in the top right-hand corner, Tyndale Rugby Club is where I spent about 6 or 7 of those years, basically learning my trade. So that was a semi-professional environment in a league that was 2 leagues below the Premiership. So in Rugby Worlds, just so you've got familiarity, you've got the Premiership, the Championship, and then you've got National 1, and that was where Tyndale were. So it was the equivalent to, say, a Division 1 club in football. I also did some extra bits around that, so I did quite a bit of volunteering at major events. So I did London Olympics, which again, if you have the opportunity to get involved with anything like this, it is an incredible opportunity. I then did Glasgow Commonwealth Games in 2014. And also, maybe this is the way that I'm wired, but I was quite motivated to get some additional strings to my bow and test myself and challenge myself. So again, the advantage of being in there, Connect helped to sort of part fund me doing my masters, had some of the most sort of pioneering people in terms of educators in that world. Kevin Banks, who sadly passed away now, was almost sort of instrumental really in that sort of Jeff Maitland original peripheral manipulation book. We had Stephen May on the Mackenzie side. Gavin Cummings was one of the most inspirational teachers of musculoskeletal stuff, never prepped a thing, just turned up, what do you want to learn about, and would just talk for about 2 hours. I was putty in his hand. And then, yeah, pain specialists like Shona and Miles that are there, and Sarah as a sort of guider in terms of sort of guiding me through that journey as well. So really, my journey from a part-time into a full-time elite sport position was starting to become a little bit of a hankering that I was after, really. So I applied for a role at Newcastle Falcons, um, and then luckily was successful. We had a doctor who worked across both, who maybe sort of put in a good word, but again, it was what I wanted to do was immerse myself completely into that elite sport world. I wanted to push myself in terms of the rehabilitation skills, the treatment skills, see the acute management, and guide that all the way through to the end where we return them back into sport. And I suppose the question sometimes that people ask is, well, why did you pick rugby? You were all football, you were all tennis growing up. For me, I think rugby was the perfect sport because it gave me such an amazing variety of different things. It gave me upper limb, lower limb, spinal conditions, concussions, and it gave me everything from that acute management and that ability to build them back up again, all the way back into their sport. And for me, rugby's an incredibly varied sport as well. Unlike other sports or even league, the difference in the athlete sizes, shapes, role positions, and all that kind of thing is actually really varied. So it makes it a lot more exciting because you're trying to match the demands that they're going to go back into. So if you've got someone who's a jumping athlete versus a front rower versus someone who's a kicker, you're going to have all the variety that comes with that. So it's a really nice sport to be involved in. And that's probably why I ended up sort of spending 6 seasons of my life there. And again, you're seeing new things year on year. Clearly, things are starting to repeat themselves as a bit of a cycle. You're going to have the short-term injuries, the long-term injuries. But again, I absolutely love my time here. And we had some great moments, some great wins, met some great people, players and staff, and fans as well, who sort of are still in contact now. And this is sort of a bit of a flavour in terms of how it looks behind the scenes in terms of the support that's there. So from a medical perspective, we had 3 doctors. We had one who was full-time, and we had 2 brilliant guys coming in part-time to help with various other things on match days or other support surrounding the club. We had a head physio, Reese, who you can see there, and then me and Andy underneath him as the sort of 2 first-team physios. We had an admin assistant, and we had a soft tissue specialist as well. And on the right-hand side, we had 3 academy physios, the lead, Dave, and then the other couple, Kyle and Toby. Then you have the coaches. So again, you've got big numbers of coaches. You've got 6 coaches in that world, Dean being the director. S&C wise, you've got 3 guys. You've got analysts. You've got academy staff as well. So it's a big team. And actually you need them all. And what does it look like in terms of a normal week? We'll talk more about this in the sort of typical day in a physio, which I'd recommend watching after this one. But what I want to draw your attention to really is there is potentially no days off. So if you do not have a wider team, so if there's not a few of you who can share the burden or the load, then actually what you can end up doing is, although they're not full days, you might actually be in every single day while the season is on. So, for example, although Wednesday is deemed a player day off, that is when you will be in with some of your long-term injured athletes. So it might be ACLs, shoulder recons, anyone who you're trying to turn around for the weekend. Then, if the game day is typically on a Saturday, the Sunday may well be the injury clinic or the recovery day that you're running. So again, the coaches will more than likely want to know what numbers do we have for training on the Monday morning. So the only way you can sort of give them a good idea is to do an injury clinic on the Sunday or first thing on Monday for a more accurate update. But again, they're going to need to want to plan who's available for the upcoming weeks. And we varied things a little bit because it didn't work at times. But again, the same sort of patterns occur. Even the day offs can potentially result in you coming in for a few hours. So your ability to switch off is fairly minimal. And that can happen almost every single week, unless there's an international week or you have a break in fixtures. Potentially you're looking at almost 6 or 7 days a week every single week for us. And there are other different challenges. So again, in this sort of world, the main sort of drive really for us is to make sure that players are robust, make sure that they are available, and we will be deemed successful if we can get above a certain percentage. In football, that percentage was 90% in this study on the right hand side there. For us, we actually had about an 80 to 85% record, and I think if we compare rugby to football, there's significant differences, isn't there, in terms of the physicality, the impacts, the traumas, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, for us, our KPI, our key performance indicator, was to try and get 85%. of those individuals and make them available, because that has a massive bearing on the success often of a club. So if you have the same group of individuals, your best players available on a consistent basis, they're all used to knowing each other's roles and responsibilities and linking up with each other, they're going to be more successful. And you can see that by the cups and the league wins that you can see on here. The higher the availability is, the more likely they are to be successful. When it drops below that, actually they end up not performing very well. And some of that is to do with the ratios. So again, for us, it changed massively. When I moved into the club, there were 52 senior players across the senior squad and the academy, and there was 2 of us. There was the head physio and myself, and we were fighting fire with this revolving door where people were just coming again and again and again. But actually the governing body stipulated that actually what we need is a ratio of 15-1. And that change in the dynamic and the ability to put quality processes in place was really, really important. And obviously injuries come in different forms, don't they? So you might have injuries that are fairly low risk, like this one. This is a guy who's taken a knock and a bit of a pull, but he walks off. He's got no real sort of major risk associated with him, versus maybe the right-hand side, where you look at that, where you actually are sort of carrying someone off who can't feel their hands, they can't feel their legs, they've got significant neural loss. And actually that can potentially lead to sort of career-threatening or ending injuries, or even sort of life-changing injuries in some situations. And this is what happened at the club. We did have a couple of athletes actually who did retire based on significant one-off incidents to do with their necks being affected. Both front rowers. We had Scott Wilson on the left-hand side, Ty Veyer on the right-hand side. Thankfully, they are all okay. They are functioning and all right. But against medical advice, we're advised to sort of retire from the sport because of the risk of potential knock-on effects, which were not desirable at all. And I think this just goes to show that when you go into sport, it is a huge responsibility. When you do step into this world, you do need to have done a pitch side qualification if you're going to do anything on the pitch. Obviously, we're going to do, there is the Grow Physio program that is here, but I strongly advise doing a recognised qualification. But that will certainly help prep you significantly for that. Other ones who have retired, this is one of the best guys, the best blokes, one of the best athletes I think I have ever worked with and probably ever will work with. This is Mark Wilson, who sadly after a knee injury decided he was going to have to step away from this world. But there is a lot of trust. There's a lot of responsibility associated with this. People are trusting you with their careers, their lives. And actually sometimes you do have situations where they can't continue. And unless they've got a contingency plan, which again, they're planning to play for X amount of years, this might come as a massive shock. So big sort of educational push at the club for us was to try and almost make sure people were ready post that. Now, the other thing I want to just talk about really is the culture that often sort of stems around professional sport. And this can be positive, or actually it can be very negative, and it can be very draining. The culture is something that the club worked on a lot while I was there. It was certainly pioneered by the club captain, who was brilliant, great bloke again, called Will Welsh. And what he decided to do alongside the coaches was create their own identity and their own branding. So they came up with this thing called True North. And again, what they tried to do was almost create a ethos, a group of individuals who all read off the same hymn sheets, stood for the same principles, and that would resonate right the way through the club and all the way through the staff. Now, this has been done in other clubs. So Saracens came under a bit of fire for valid reasons when they broke the salary cap, but they came up with 4 key phrases. So honesty, discipline, work rate and humility, and they had that plastered across the stadium. At the top of the stadium, they had it in the training ground, they had this everywhere. So basically this was instilled in all the individuals, and they broke that down into greater detail so everyone was on the same page with that. And I think that is something that's really, really important. So when you go into this world, if you are starting off fresh, or you kind of go into it and there's certain things that aren't potentially the way that they should be, often if there are bad habits that have developed, it can be unhealthy for the individuals, it can be unhealthy for the team, and stop them progressing. So worth sort of having a little look at. And that is sometimes what happens, unfortunately. So in the early days, what I found at the club was there was a very pointing fingers, blame culture, where actually if somebody did break down with an injury, everyone was pointing at each other, who's responsible. Whereas what should happen is we should all come together, we should talk about it, decide where we went wrong, and just make sure that we don't make those mistakes again. The worst thing that you can do is just keep repeating the same errors year on year and not developing and growing from that. So again, it might not be the easiest thing in the world to sit down and look at reflecting on it. Sometimes you have to throw your hands up and say, you know what, this could have been done a lot better on our side, and actually sort of almost piece that whole thing together. But the communication side, absolutely critical. Because fundamentally, when we have this, the performance focus is key. The winning culture that you develop will not be able to continue unless you've got that strong foundation that's there. And that happens a lot within sort of high level sport, really. And that has a big knock on effect to the amount of funding that you have. So, again, when we're looking at sort of lottery funded Sport England worlds, then again, they're going to allocate funding, and it's usually based on the performance levels and the success within that sport. So you can see this broken down by sport and by the games that are occurring on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, looking at how that's actually divvied up in terms of sort of where the money is allocated. And as I say, this is sort of generally driven by medals that are won. So depending on the performance, there's massive amounts of pressure, because actually people's jobs and the next Olympic cycles and the funding that comes from this is largely down to the medal winning nature of that sport. So you'll have different sports, and you can sort of see there the areas where most funding is, just in sort of bar chart form rather than pie chart. And again, you can see within sort of Team GB, British Worlds, you've got athletics, cycling, rowing, sailing, swimming, all being those key areas that are most successful. And that's matched by the funding. And you will have different individuals who are ranked according to the levels and the chances that they have of potentially achieving medals at certain games. And that funding will often match that. So the drive and the desire for the individuals to go from an entry level up to that sort of podium potential is huge. And that funding is very much driven from that. So again, when these people have gone on this journey, yes, they're all about winning, but actually there's certainly a backstory and a lot of other aspects to consider relating to funding that can surround this as well. And this is sort of the world where I worked in. So during the 5 seasons that I was there, I honestly thought, you know what, these new changes that we're starting to instill and the changes in the culture and everything are starting to develop. We went from 11th to 8th to 4th to then surely the only place was going to be first, but actually we ended up bottom. We got relegated to the championship, and then in my final season, full season there, we went back up to the championships from there. But again, some of the margins in this world are so fine. Some of the differences between winning with the last play of the game versus losing the last play of the game, that was the difference really for us between literally finishing 4th and finishing 12th. And clearly we need to make sure that we have all the fundamental important bits correct for the athletes, things like nutrition, sleep, sports science. Obviously Ronaldo is the epitome. He's got a team of absolute experts that basically are there to try and look after him and his body to make sure he is in the optimal condition, probably why he's going to keep playing high level sport till he's 40. But actually there's also some other little variables that people believe that feed into this, and I call them the sort of the 1%ers really, and they're little mental things that can have a bearing. So things like the changing room quality. So we invested quite a lot of money for us in our changing room to make sure we had a nicer environment. It was all decked out. It all looked very nice. And we did the opposite to the away room after we went to Bath one year, and it was the worst changing room I have ever been in. It was basically tiny. They built a wall so no one could see each other. They'd blocked all of the sort of underbench storage area. So there's bags everywhere with 30 massive blokes in there. We were in a tiny little shower trying to strap and rub. They'd put the heating on full blast. It was generally the worst possible environment that we had. And other people have done similar things. So Norwich decided, little 1%ers, they decided to paint their away room pink because they believed that would reduce testosterone, make the opposition less competitive. And would that have a bearing? You could go one of two ways. You could make it as luxurious as possible with coffee machines and that kind of thing, or make it as sort of horrible as you possibly can, as cramped and whatever. So actually people don't have a very good prep. And there's other things as well that have bearing. So clearly sort of mentality of certain stadiums that players go to, fans will have a bearing. Some are more vocal. I remember going to Gloucester and across sort of down at Newport Dragons where there were really hostile crowds, and how did that have a bearing on the performance levels? And they always talk, don't they, about that sort of 12th man in football or the 16th man in rugby. That can have a massive bearing. And other things are, the media can have a play on the mentality and get a bit of a have a bit of a negative or positive spin on things. And similarly, sort of fans and what have you can also have a bearing. And sometimes it's little individuals will have certain superstitions that they go through, certain rituals, routines, whatever it may be. Nadal has this classic one, doesn't he? Before every single point that he does, it's the same thing. He checks his strings and then adjusts his shorts, does his nose rub, does his shoulder touch, his hair tuck. But he's really successful. It gets him in the right frame of mind to get there. But these are some of the little routines that these high-level athletes go through. And I just want to very quickly touch upon some of the sort of challenges further that are in this. And really, you can be working as hard as you possibly can behind the scenes. Things can be looking amazing, but actually that doesn't always lead to success. So, few challenges really in season. They typically feel very long. So depending on the worlds that you're in, so rugby would generally go from say like a June all the way through until about a sort of early May sort of time really. So they're very long. So you don't get time off, and you can't often take time off until the off season. It does feel like you're sort of saying no to a lot of invites and social events because it's pretty unsociable hours if you're on the road. I found it pretty hard to switch off. It ends up getting a little bit stressful because you feel like you've got to sort of you're immersed in that world. You're returning athletes, you're pouring your heart and soul into getting them back on time. And if they do re-injure for whatever reason, which thankfully wasn't very often, again, it kind of falls on you. So it does come with a bit of stress. Feels like you're on a bit of a roller coaster sometimes, whether you're winning, you're losing. If you're on a good streak, then it's great. If you're on a bad streak, it's not a very enjoyable place to be. But again, physically and mentally, you're pretty immersed in that. What I would say is trying to establish an idea of the CPD or the training and development programs that are involved in that is really important. Some institutions, certainly the EIS, seem to do that amazingly well. Within certain clubs, it's very mixed. So try and get a good flavour. I set up something as a CPD program within the club. But again, sort of sometimes you rely on a lot of that experience-led informal discussions around that. Culture, really important. So if the atmosphere, politics, result-driven stuff is all really important in terms of sort of driving that culture. And then recognition, really. So quite often, if you aren't in a very good culture, it's just that almost expectation that you get everybody back, you pour your heart and soul into it, and that's just the expectation. And actually, sometimes when you're on a good streak and there's not many injuries and you've got a bit of breathing space, it's great. When you're on a losing streak and you are just flogged, it isn't a very nice place to be. And basically, you can quite easily end up sort of going from being pretty full, pretty keen in the early days to then pretty much running on empty. So as the seasons went on, I certainly, alongside having a little boy who didn't sleep for 3 years and working insane hours, it started to slowly erode me away. But now look at me on the right-hand side, happy as the day is long. And some of the other things that kind of feed into that, again, on a weekend, most people who are working a Monday to Friday switch off. They have the weekends to recover. For us, we're actually then on the road some of the time in Newcastle, obviously based in the northeast of England, looking at the other locations that you have. You can see we are the furthest away from anyone who's there. So again, our away games, a lot of traveling that's involved with that, and that is pretty draining after a while. You get there pretty late, you then go into a hotel, you start doing all the treatments, the strap-ins, the whatever, so you don't get there and then kick back and watch a film. You're then sort of almost doing some of the last minute little preparations, and then the next morning you sort of have your breakfast, you go into your taping slots, and then basically you're sort of almost back into the game, doing your injury clinics after the game, get on the bus, carry in all your kit and go from there. But it's not all doom and gloom. I don't want this to sound like it's horrendous. We do get some amazing trips. It's great to see the world. We had trips to Philadelphia. We went to Russia, in Sochi. And again, so I've just come back from Dubai, really. But Other things that are worth just considering. This is kind of how I felt it was really when I sort of pulled in my little Fiesta, and sort of parked next to some of these supercars that are there. The players generally have a lot more money than the staff. Um, the cars that they drive are a lot better. And again, sort of I remember going into the club and just being like, God, should I even be parking my car here? Should I hide it out the back in somewhere away from all these nice cars, really? And that's the same in football. It's bizarre, but the amount of money in football compared to rugby is totally different. But actually, the salaries that staff get can be very consistent. So rugby union is generally better paid than rugby league. However, football in Premiership worlds, where you think, God, they've got so much money floating around, they're buying players for millions and millions of pounds, paying them hundreds of £1,000s a week. Actually, sometimes the pay levels that they get are around that sort of 35 grand mark for a first team physio working full time in a Premiership outfit. And actually, for my good friend here, I work with, he was on the same wage for about 4 or 5 years, really. The advantage in football is often they get a little bit of a Christmas or an end of season bonus depending on where they finish in the league, which makes it feel a little bit nicer. But actually, their basic salary is pretty similar. And the reason is this really, because there's so many individuals who are mad keen to work in sport, the supply levels are huge. Whereas there's not that many jobs available. So it drives the market price down. So actually people are willing to do it, and they will be continue to be willing to do it for this. But what I would say is try and remember your worth. If you have gone through this program, through all the Grow Physio teaching, you have applied those things and you've taken them all on board, you're going to go in with an amazing skill set that you're going to be able to use to develop and enhance the club. So sell yourself, because people won't naturally offer you more money. But if you go in and say, look, this is the skill set that I'm bringing, this is why I demand X amount of money. Pay isn't everything. Happiness is obviously kind of a huge part of that. Health is a huge part of that. But actually, you need to value your own time as well. And there are other options. So you might have part-time, if we go from the top left-hand corner, really, part-time roles, just doing a quick little search before this presentation, really. Part-time roles within a Premiership outfit in an academy, £14 to £16 an hour. Hull KR is a rugby league club. They've got a salary full-time, sort of equivalent of Newcastle Falcons, but in a rugby league world, salary 30 grand. British Triathlon Worlds as a physio, 30 grand to 35 grand, depending on experience. But if you contrast that just to someone who's a couple of years qualified going into a band 6 rotation at 34 to 41 grand sort of territories, or looking at sort of even working from home or having mixed roles and much more flexibility, nicer hours, all that kind of thing, and you're getting sort of 35 to 45 grand with some private companies. Again, it's a bit of a thinker and a head scratcher with why we do this. But I wouldn't have done it any other way, which is, again, sort of the flip side to arguing that one way or the other. And the other things that are worth just considering, which happened this year, is Wasps and Worcester were both Premiership rugby clubs who both went into administration. All of the staff were sacked and laid off because they had such amazing amounts of debt, £95 million worth of debt. So they've gone into administration, and that's the end of your role. So there's not a great deal of job security sometimes when you're working in sport. The contrast to that, which is the most staggering thing that hits home close to home, is Alan Pardew signed an 8-year managerial contract deal. I don't understand why football managers get this, but it's something that has just become the norm. If they sign a contract for 8 years, they do a shocking job and they get sacked after 3, they will be paid for the remainder of their contract. So again, when I was at Newcastle, it was actually a permanent role, whereas some people will offer you a 1-year or a 2-year deal. So it's worth just, again, negotiating if you're relocating or wanting to sort of see this through long term, how long you're going with that. Because when you're in it, you are more than likely to only really have time off if you're significantly going to miss something. So if you're getting married, that is usually a winner. If you are having a child, that is usually a winner for paternity or maternity leave. But apart from that, it is very rare that you will get time off to go and hang out with friends, go on stag do's, any of that kind of stuff, really. But there you go, my beautiful wife and all my friends on across Ibiza getting married. So yeah, the other things you will probably kiss goodbye to are your Christmas breaks. So often at Christmas time, most people wind down, don't they? For us, that's when people want to watch sport. So therefore, you have a more intensive fixture list in rugby. This was the saddest time I've ever had. We basically got beaten by Saracens on Christmas Eve. I then went to my mother-in-law's for Christmas with the family. And on Boxing Day, I had to get this very sad looking toy soldier bus called a mega bus back up to Newcastle. It broke down in Leeds. It took me about 9 hours to get back. And then we were back in the following morning at 8 a.m. for a review. So again, just bear in mind that you will be making sacrifices a lot. And this is really why I have started to shift myself more towards sort of family time, really. Again, this is absolutely fundamentally key. I didn't want to miss out on this little guy growing up for obvious reasons. Look at him. He is unbelievable. But yeah, he was part of that sort of Newcastle Falcons life. This was us. We'd always get there half an hour before injury clinic, hang out with each other. The players were amazing with him. And actually, it was great to have him part of that journey. But actually now, moving out of that, I've got to spend a lot more time with him. This is probably one of the happiest little moments of my entire sports physio career, really, where you see my little guy come running out with the team captain, Will Welsh, that you saw earlier on. This was my last game, so it was a nice little tribute. Thanks to everyone who organised this. But you can see there he is, absolutely incredible, running out with the captain on my last day. But these sorts of things, having your kids part of that, and it was always lovely seeing the players sort of running out and having their own kids on the pitch and being part of that journey, because it is something to celebrate. It's such a unique world that you can be part of. Professional sport has some amazing individuals in it, some amazing opportunities. So yeah, a great big thank you really to everybody who sort of made that possible for the little guy charging off. And on that as well, not just thank you to them, obviously a massive thank you to my family, parents, wife, everyone who's been part of that amazing journey. We've actually managed to go on holidays since there that you can see there, but everybody needs to have a rock, and she is absolutely my rock and doing some amazing things in her world as well. And this is sort of how life looks maybe after you've worked in a professional sporting world. You can start to pick and choose things once you've got a great skill set. You've still got your qualifications. So I've just been working at the World Gymnastics Championships. I've just been out to Dubai to work in the sort of the World Sevens competition there. I've been doing some bits with volleyball, with athletics, with judo, with the gymnastics sort of side of things. So again, it's a really nice skill set that once you've developed the skills that you have in that environment, the rehab, the taping, the assessment skills, the ability to guide people, you become a good commodity in future years. And I still do the occasional volunteering role. I still love being part of these big events. So I've just been down to Birmingham and worked with the hockey there, basically sort of assisting any of the athletes who need anything additional from that side. This is Dubai, so we've just literally come back. Tan is obviously fading. But again, a great cohort of individuals, an amazing skill set, had one of the biggest names in sort of rugby sevens coming out with us in Heather Fish to do the coaching. And again, supporting the netball, the rugby sevens side of things is an incredible sort of opportunity I never would have had it not been for that. And it does come with some other little challenges going on tour. You do have elements of nutrition, sleep, diet, all the recovery side of things that are absolutely critically important. And the other side of things that I'm now involved in is a lot of teaching. So here I am. On Grow Physio, I also do quite a lot of work in different universities. So this is some of the work that I was doing down in Gloucester. Again, they've got the perfect slogan, haven't they? Let's grow, in their Grow hub that they have, all tying beautifully into the Grow Physio vibes. Do some teaching at sort of specific events. This is us at Middlesbrough Football Club going through some of the return to sport post-tendinopathy guidance at their symposium. Some international teaching and work at Therapy Expo, huge event down in Birmingham, and then also being able to go out to Dubai's and Saudi's, out to Jeddah, and we're going out to Riyadh later on this month to do some teaching and sort of share the knowledge and the skill sets that we have. So again, I'm a big believer in trying to share that knowledge set, and actually sort of seeing different cultures, learning styles is all developing me as well. And you also get to meet some great people, some great friends that I've made through doing this. These are the guys at sort of Physio Matters and some of the moderating to try and build that up from there. So that's it, guys. So just in summary, really, working in sport for me has been a privilege, and I feel so honoured to have had that opportunity. But don't forget to value your own worth. When you come into that world, discuss what you're willing to do, what your time's going to be, and mentally prepare yourself for that. That's your time before you go in to negotiate contracts from there, because it will be very time consuming. And if you don't love it, you'll get found out, you'll start to resent it, you'll not enjoy it anywhere near as much as you should. And I would say just remember to refill your own glass. And what I mean by that is if you're constantly pouring and emptying stuff from your glass and you're not refilling it with things that enhance you mentally, physically, then you will burn out in that world. The skill set, again, that you develop along that journey is incredible. It's quite specific to sporting worlds, but that makes your potential sort of future employability with those transferable skills really useful. Try best you can to have a family that is going to support you on that journey, particularly if you start to have a family yourself of your own. Again, you need to try and retain that healthy balance. But I don't have any regrets from doing it. There were certainly times when I felt absolutely near broken and wrecked, and why am I doing this? But actually, looking back on it, some great memories, some great friends that I've kind of continued. The experiences are helping me to share some of these things with you, which hopefully help the next generation. So massive thank you. Well done, everyone, for sticking with this. Hope there's loads of stuff. Hope you're super motivated to go into sport, but maybe select the areas that you want to go into. That's it, guys. These are the platforms that I operate on. Please do get in contact with me. You can email me. You can drop me a message on anything. If you have enjoyed this and you feel like it's something that other people could benefit from, then please do share it. The Grow Physio Academy is something that I'm really proud of, and hopefully it will help many, many people for many years to come. All the best. Take care of yourselves, guys, and they'll hopefully see you in the next session. Okay, folks, there you go. So that is hopefully some bits that will help you think a little bit deeper in and around whether this is something that you'd like to pursue, not pursue now. Hopefully I haven't put too many people off. If anyone has any questions that you guys would like to ask, then please do sort of fire anything into the chat. If you feel confident enough to, then by all means, feel free to sort of unmute yourself. I'll just give you guys the rights to do that, because I'm more than happy to ask anything. I know it's quite almost a bit of a precipice where you're thinking, oh, shall I go down this route? What would I do that would potentially line me up the best? Do I want to go into it directly or not? So let's have a look. Des, check the question above. Let's have a look. I don't have any questions from you, Des, above, unfortunately. If you want to rewrite it, that would be great. I can't see anything. Maybe it's me missing it.
I have a question. I just thought it might be easier to talk rather than type out a long message. So I'm working within a local football team, but I'm the sole practitioner. So I'm doing kind of extra CPD courses, but I'm quite a new graduate. And it looks really good. I'm gonna join the Grow Physio. Is there anything else you would recommend doing? Because during the day I'm a vocational rehab consultant, so I do have others around me, but the skill set within my role, I would say there's only 2 of us that are sports rehabilitators. The rest are kind of psychology based.
Okay. Yeah, it's a really typical place to be, isn't it, when you start off? And I think it's weird because when you start and you've got the least experience, you probably go into like a lower level club sometimes and you're isolated. Whereas bizarrely, as you get better, more confident, more skills, more experience at a higher level, you actually end up with a bigger team of doctors around you. And it's really nice to feel like you've got people that you can palm off airway management to a doctor who's with you all the time, or go and get a scan sorted out somewhere at the drop of a hat sometimes. So it is a weird one. It sounds like you're doing exactly the right thing. It sounds like you were very like me. Almost every other weekend, I was spending any spare money that I had on doing additional CPD courses. I guess the difference is I tended sort of within Newcastle, we didn't have very much. So we ended up sort of traveling around the country, spending loads of money on hotel fees and things. So that's the world that we're in now, where there's so much available to you. online or a little bit closer is hopefully a little bit more of an advantage for you. Yeah, I guess what else would I recommend really? I mean, I think as long as you are clear with what you have that are the essentials, so the trauma equipment and things that you need on a match day or at a training day if shit does hit the fan, and someone does have an allergic reaction or they suddenly go down with something that's you're a bit unsuspecting of, there hasn't been cry testing, etc., then actually make sure that you've got a defibrillator as a minimum, airway management as a minimum. And then some of the consumables that you have, they're the sort of things like the taping and the little bits of massage cream and things like that that you're just going to use, but they're not the things that are going to save lives, really. So I would always start at one end and almost just make sure you've got all the essential bits of equipment that you need and that you know how to use them. And if you don't, then try and get some sort of grant or support from the club that you're working at to try and put you through some of those qualifications, if that makes sense. But it is a real challenge trying to juggle lots of things. And I said there, I haven't got any regrets, but I think if I was going to look back, I would try and have better boundaries. So I'd probably say, I'm willing to do this, this, and this. And that's what I'm willing to do for this role. If you want anything additional, then you're going to have to get extra support, or I'm going to have to lose some of my responsibilities from wherever it is. So, yeah, I would say just being much clearer with boundaries of what you're willing to do and not willing to do early on, and just have those upfront conversations can be really helpful. I appreciate it takes a bit of time to get there, and it's not always an easy conversation, but I think everybody generally appreciates the openness and honestness, if that's a word, from there.
Okay, that makes sense.
Is there anything else
Perfect.
you want me to clarify on that at all?
No, I don't think so. I think definitely putting boundaries in place will be good for expectations and things. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a think, write them down on a bit of paper before you go in of what you're willing to do, because they will always want more from you. And I think probably just being consistent with this is what I'm offering, this is what I'm willing to do, because you will always get lured into more things. And when I think back when there was only two of us managing about 52 athletes in rugby, it was bonkers. Like we were just being pulled from pillar to post really, and the quality really dropped, the enjoyment dropped. So actually, yeah, you've got to get a lot out of it as well. So make sure that you put those things in to ensure that you get enough out of it, really.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Cool. Dorothy, do you want to ask a question? So you got your hand up.
Yes, if I may. So, thank you for the webinar. So I am the owner of the clinic. I am an osteopath, and I also have a background in physiotherapy. So I graduated as a physiotherapist back in Poland. But
You're a
my question
superpower,
is,
Dorothy.
sorry?
You are a superpower, physio and osteopath.
An osteopath, yeah. So my question is, because that clinic is quite new, is in Isha in Fit Partnership. So it's quite, I would say, posh gym. And I'm just wondering if you have any tips how to reach potential clients to attract them to the clinic. And also because we've got a lot of sports people, we've got racing in Sandown in Isha also. Do you have any tips how to attract more clients to the clinic potentially?
Yeah, it sounds like the perfect setup, doesn't it? It sounds like you've got a huge feed directly from where you
Yes.
are, in theory. You need to demonstrate the skills that you bring and what you can offer. Some of that might well be something like I don't know, you might do like a demonstration of different taping things that maybe CrossFit people think of, common injuries that CrossFitters may well need. Sometimes it's even things like they get loads of calluses on their hands and things, and we kind of came up with some nice little K-tape options that actually they could use for that. So often I think probably like an injury prevention little, I don't know, you could do like a half an hour, put some food on, everyone will come for free food. It might be something pretty cheap that you just put on like a little spread, and then almost like do a presentation in terms of these are common injuries that you might well find in a typical gym user or a CrossFit person. And these are some of the injury prevention strategies that you can use. Just to let you guys know that these are all the options that you have. We have experience in these conditions, whatever it may be. People have set up like a social walk as well. So like you might actually just have a walk and talk thing where you invite all the gym users to go for a walk with a physio or an osteopath or whoever it is, and ask questions for free. I think that works better than inviting them in for free consultations, because you guys are just in theory going for a walk and spouting a little bit of recommended education. And it means that you're definitely not going to be shown anything because you're out walking. So they're not going to start revealing things because you need to keep moving. So again, that sounds really interesting. Sounds like you've got this going on. The reality is we need to go and check it. So just book in. I've got this availability, and let them do it that way. I don't think, from experience of working in private clinics, that putting on ads where you give people a free 15-minute consultation, I don't feel like that works very well. But I think these walks where you can hit a lot of people at different times seem to work quite well. And I think probably building that community, and probably not going hard sell, but creating opportunities to reach out and kind of make contact with them would be quite a nice way to do it. Is there anything that
Thank
you've
you.
done that's worked or not worked so far?
Well, it's just been 2 weeks at the moment when we started. So the Fit launched from the January the 6th, I think. So, it's still getting really slow, and I'm thinking how to attract more patients to the clinic, especially the sports people. So how to get into the rugby club, for example, inside that racing course. Um, I'm not sure if they will allow me to do that, because probably someone from the outside, it's not really easy to get into that clubs, isn't it?
Mm. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess it's just about building up the relationships to then hopefully allow you to get access to those people. And I mean, I think educational stuff is quite good, that you're just trying to share your knowledge. And if people
Mm-hmm.
do have things that they need checking or being managed in a better way, then you're there. You're not sort of being really hard sell about it, but you say this is what we bring. This is what we can offer. It's no obligation. We may well do some little drop-in sessions if you want them, and do it that way. I think works quite well. I'm not really a business-minded person, but looking at some of the other community sort of build-ups that I've seen people do that are quite nice. They seem to be getting little bits of feed off on the back of that. So yeah, try and be a little bit creative. Maybe sort of reach out. I'm not very good at banging down doors and just harassing people again and again. I kind of ask them once, do you want to come? And then if they don't, they don't. But I think it's probably something that, if you've got a really good quality service, and this is kind of how I try and get around my promotional stuff, is it's to try and let people know that it's there. It can help you develop in your careers much quicker than what I did, and what other people are doing at the moment. Give yourself a better edge, so you don't have to spend loads of time volunteering for free and things. So yeah, I think probably if you do it, you kind of have that feel that you are helping everybody. And don't be afraid to kind of go back to them if you don't get a yes straight away, would be my advice, really.
Yeah, thank you.
That's all right, no problems. There's a little mention here towards Adam, who is Adam Radwan, who's gone to Tigers, the fastest man in the world, who I worked with at Newcastle Falcons. So yeah, congratulations to him. Our course is accepted by insurances. I think it'll probably depend on which insurance and things and what you were going down with, really. CPD, generally, some of it is accredited, some of it is not. You'll get certificates for accredited stuff, not accredited things. Some accredited programs and courses are actually done by companies that are not medical at all. I guess the advantage you have is it's from practical experience and years of working of what works and doesn't, and cutting through a lot of the BS that's out there, really, if you do any of the courses on the site. So next one is, do pro teams prefer younger therapists or more mature? I would say it's a totally dependent on the individual who's there. I don't think age actually matters. I think it's probably easier in some respects, because if you've got some more experience and exposure to more injuries. But if you've done that right the way through kind of your university career, like I spent a lot of time shadowing and working at Leeds United and Sheffield United during my actual degree, and just volunteering and trying to see behind the scenes. the more experience and exposure you have, the more comfortable you are around injuries and individuals. If you've played sport yourself, sometimes you're a little bit more used to that environment. But I would say it doesn't matter at all. I've seen some really quite late stage in their career physios, almost kind of nearing sort of the last 10 years before retirement, who've been doing an exceptional job. I've seen people come in. At the moment, we've got two amazing sports therapy students with us. They've done a few other things in their life. They're sort of 26 and 30, but they're fantastic assets, and I feel totally confident, or the athletes feel really comfortable around them. I think a lot of that rapport and the soft skills that develop the relationships is often more about what the athletes want and what the managers and the coaches want, and that openness and honesty. Sometimes you have to be the bad guy in sport. You are giving them some bad news sometimes, that they are injured, they are going to be out for this amount of time, they're going to miss these competitions. But actually, they need to know the truth. There's no point in sugarcoating that sometimes and just saying, well, it's a chance that you could get back to this if you do this or whatever. If it's an absolute, if you know in your own head that someone's got a grade 2 MCL and there's an event in 4 or 5 weeks' time, they ain't going to do it unless they go in there with huge amounts of risk associated, depending on the sport, really. So judo, that wouldn't last 5 seconds when someone attacks that knee. If you're an athlete in football or rugby and someone tackles that, or you step off that side, again, it's not enough time to build a resilient body, really. Knowing healing times and what you need to get into that athlete. They may well have been in a brace for 4 to 6 weeks potentially during that first time. So do you have any tips about getting the experience? Feel it's so competitive, and I've been struggling to get replies and opportunities. Totally hear you, Charlie. I think it's one of the hardest things. A lot of people will get bombarded if you are working in this world already. We used to get about 20 to 30 requests a month from people to come in and shadow. It just became crazy to try and sift through them all. And I was always somebody who really wanted to let people in, let people see what was going on behind the scenes. But unfortunately, just the volume and the amount of students and things that we had, we just couldn't accommodate it, really. So in terms of the sports, I know people naturally think of football and rugby and these teams. Think about other things. Like, my advice with someone this week was to maybe explore handball. So I worked with handball for a little while. They actually get a lot of upper limb and lower limb injuries, which again requires quite a lot of rehab. They're all pretty hard and nails, much like the judo lot and the rugby lot. They play with niggles and grumbles. They're not very precious. So they're really good to work with. They're really motivated to get back. And you get a real nice variety of things going on. So even think outside the box of different sports that you could potentially work with. Keep on battering on that door. I would say, if you really want to do something, put a feeler out, ask them what you want them to, what they'd like you to do to bring into that environment. So if you get in contact with someone like myself and you sort of said, look, I'd like to come in and do some shadowing, can I offer any assistance on camps or competitions or anything like that, or come watch something? Is there anything I need to do? I'd probably say, well, try and go away, learn some taping techniques, maybe go and do a first aid, or even ideally like a trauma course, so we can actually trust you with some of the athletes. And then once you get in, hopefully you start to build up a relationship. Just offer to do the bits and pieces that maybe aren't the most desirable, thinking about sort of almost, I don't know, laying tape out, or almost, I don't know, filling water bottles, or anything that it may well be behind the scenes that helps make our life easier. Might be potentially like number crunching data or collecting data for people. Like, we've got our students at the moment, and I think about them and why I've given them so much responsibility. And it's probably because they're really keen, they're really forthcoming with ideas, they're definitely engaged. And compared to the year before, we didn't have any of that with our students at all. So my natural human tendency is, if people are keen and they're willing to learn and they're motivated, I'm going to pour all of my energy into them versus someone who's not forthcoming, not asking questions, not thinking about different things that they could do to improve the service. So yeah, just be super, super keen. How do you approach the need for ensuring that athletes are fully recovered from injury alongside the pressure to get them back to competition quickly? Have you ever had any confrontation regarding decisions you make? This is part and parcel of pro sport. If you aren't comfortable having uncomfortable conversations, you're not going to last very long, or you'll just have to sit in the dark and try and get the head physio or head therapist to take the lead on a lot of that, really. You have to give your expert opinion based on your experience and your skill set and your knowledge. That's why you're there. And don't forget that you're the medical expert. Coaches will have probably been involved in the sport. They will have seen lots of injuries. They'll have a pretty good idea of how long certain injuries will take. But that's not necessarily exactly what somebody has. So you will always get challenged. You always get pushback. And if you say, I don't know, a grade 1 ATFL, right, we're going to take 7 weeks with this. They just go, you're crazy. Like, this person, we're going to strap it up and we're going to get you out next week. And sometimes it's a little bit of a backwards and forwards conversation. There's one extreme at one end, and then there's a difference at the other, really. And you just have to stay firm with what you have decided is your plan. And sometimes that's tough. And that's one of the other reasons why I've kind of tried to give time scales as a little bit of a graph on the website. Again, if you've got this condition and you think it's this grade, it's probably going to take you around this sort of time. So you've got a ballpark figure. But if you're ever unsure, don't forget to ask and reach out to people who've maybe seen some of these. How has it looked? We've created so many protocols for so many injuries in relation to the judo world that we're currently in, that now it's really easy to pick that up and have a bit of a template that we work on. It sometimes changes. Sometimes people really progress through it super quick. We've got an ACL at the moment who I think could probably be on the mat now at about 4 or 5 months, which is crazy because she's not going to compete in theory till about a year. But she looks so good and she's hitting so many markers. The recent testing course that I've put together goes through a lot of the milestones and the benchmarks and the differences that you need to look for to ensure that somebody's hit the right level to go back into elements of running or change of direction and training. So it's, again, really important to have benchmarks, targets that go through that journey. And then obviously you can kind of gauge how they're doing relative to the timescales that you think they're at. Because when you reflect on the journey, if you haven't created those goals and gone, oh, wow, that was far too advanced, for some reason it took them ages to get back. Or you might have the other scenario where actually they're back so much quicker than you thought. What have you done in that person's journey, or what previous injuries have they had? What's their age, their gender, all these variables that kick in. But you want to try and take the positive things from that journey and then apply it the next time. And if things haven't gone so well, why has it not gone so well? Can you amend things and change things? And nobody's the same. We can't lift a protocol up and just apply it the same way to the same person, because everyone's totally different. And it then has the exciting part where you start to think about the position they're playing in, the demands of their sport. What sport is it they're going to do? How are you going to get them back in? Are you going to put them straight back in? Are you going to give them a half? Are you going to give them 20 minutes? How many sprint meters? How many accelerations? You're trying in the background to prepare the athlete for whatever it is they're going to go back to, in a controlled environment, to then an uncontrolled environment, to then almost like this chaos world where there's so many variables, like it would be in a competition state, really. So I hope that helps answer that. Has anyone else got any questions at all that you have? There's a question from Love, a lovely name, just saying the connection's not stable. Will there be a recording? Yes. So the whole thing is recorded. If you want to look back at any of this, then you absolutely can. But if anyone's got any other questions that you want to ask, then please do fire away. No more questions coming in. Cool. Well, I'll wrap up then, guys. So I hope that's been useful. I wish you all the best in your sort of endeavors. If you've got any questions on the back of this, then please do feel free to get in contact with me. My email is steve@growphysioacademy.com. do get in touch if you want to. The Grow Physio Academy is there for you, online, available. If you want to delve into anything in a bit more detail, rewatch this, rewatch some of the other areas of what it maybe looks like in a normal sort of day and how you prepare for that. And all the other injury sort of guidance on trauma courses, testing athletes, how to help boost recovery, ACL management, etc., etc. So hope it's been really useful. I'll send you out an email with the link from YouTube on. And then, yeah, just a big thank you from me, really. And yeah, looks like there's loads of thank yous coming in. So you're very welcome, guys. I very rarely kind of do chat about my own journey. So it's quite nice to kind of reflect on that as well. So yeah, hopefully catch you guys next Wednesday at the trauma course that I'm doing again on the webinar. I'll send you guys a link out if you do want to jump on that. Or you can access everything, as I say, in your own time to hopefully boost your careers. But this is the last time I see you. All the very best and enjoy your evenings, guys. Take care.